Good morning, everybody. Today is the second webinar of the series of webinars conducted through Pediatric Dermatology Forum. Today we are fortunate enough to have Dr. Vasudha Belgaonkar with us. I don't think so she requires any introduction. She is a powerhouse of knowledge, and we are all excited to learn about mycobacterial skin diseases from her vast experience all throughout these years. So I welcome Dr. Vasudha and hand it over to her to carry out her presentation. Welcome, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Swapnil, and I'd like to thank Dr. Inamdar sir, Dr. Ajay Deshpande sir, and Dr. Mutalik sir, and all of you for giving me this opportunity to interact with you on this forum about a topic which is very close to my heart. I'll just share my screen. Please bear with me. Screen. Hello.
Yes. Yeah, it is visible.
It is visible. It is visible.
Is my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's begin about, this is pretty vast topic, and today I shall be covering amongst human pathogenic mycobacteria. I'll be covering mycobacterial tuberculosis complex and non-tuberculous mycobacteria. So the M. tuberculosis complex, we are familiar with only tuberculosis, but there are many other non-human, that is, they are either bovine or avian or murine. So they are also quite capable of causing cutaneous tuberculosis, and of course the atypical mycobacteria, which are actually supposed to be called as non-tuberculous mycobacteria. We'll be dealing with them a little later on. So before we move on, let us understand the reason why these mycobacterial infections occur in the human host. This is actually an interplay between the host immunity and the pathogenicity of the organism. So first line of defense is of course the innate immune response, which enters, and if it is possible to eliminate this infection without priming the antigen specific cells, then there is nothing that can happen. Further, we have the acquired immune response, which if it is unable to eliminate the infection, then we move on to the stage of quiescent infection, where the infection is controlled with help of the bacteria persist in a non-replicating form. Next, we have the stage of active infection, where the bacterial replication is maintained at a subclinical level, but there are no clinical signs or symptoms. And finally, when all these defense mechanisms fail, we have what is known as, so the symptoms will vary. So this is basically a spectrum which will be seen in all mycobacteria, whether it is tuberculosis or typical mycobacteria or leprosy. So with this understanding, we'll move on. So let us look at the burden of childhood tuberculosis, because TB is the first thing we want to deal with. So this is basically the tip of the iceberg, because what we have or what we see, the numbers are far more than what they are estimated to be. And India has the dubious distinction of being amongst the highest burden countries in the world. So cutaneous TB is basically, it comprises of about 2% of extrapulmonary tuberculosis cases and can go up to 1% of a typical dermatopedy. In institutional practice, it will go to much beyond this percentage. In private practice, probably it is up to 1%, depending upon the kind of patients that you see in private practice, of course. Now, the predominant age group is around the peripubertal and adolescent age, but younger children are also going to be affected. The most important risk factor is history of TB in a household contact. Now, this is extremely important and the key to management of these children. Now, delay in seeking treatment and delay at the healthcare provider level. The delay in seeking treatment is because of the innocuous nature of these lesions. So the patients and parents don't present to the healthcare system. The diagnosis is delayed because it is a great masquerader. Tuberculosis can mimic anything. Any organ that it affects can mimic any other condition. So these two reasons are responsible for children presenting us in an extremely widespread manner, even in the form of cutaneous tuberculosis. So now, how does pediatric TB compare with adult cutaneous tuberculosis? So the clinical features are quite similar in both these age groups, except that children are probably more prone to disseminate disease. great amount of influence systemic involvement, even up to more than 50%. And we have to look for lung, bones, and abdominal TB in this particular age group. Now, the classification of tuberculosis. This is important to understand the clinical features. There are 3 classifications. Each one is dependent upon different factors. The first one is, of course, the system which is based on the route of infection. If it is exogenous route, that means that there is no TB in the body, but there is inoculation from an outside source. Next, we have an endogenous route, which could occur by contiguous spread. That means direct extension of disease from an underlying structure, which is immediately in contact with the skin. Then we have hematogenous spread and a lymphatic spread. Then we have a classification system which is based on the bacillary load, which is very similar to that we use for leprosy. We have multibacillary and paucibacillary forms, and the interpretation of your investigations is going to rely on this knowledge as well, as to which form is going to have more bacilli versus which form is going to have fewer. So we should learn how to interpret the investigations based on this knowledge. And finally, we have the third, which is supposed to be more simple. It has two basic categories, that is the true TB versus the tuberculosis. In true TB, we have primary, where the host is not immune, has never been infected with TB before, and secondary, where there is already some amount of immunity because of a past infection of tuberculosis. So on this background, let us begin with the different cases. So the first case is a young child who comes from a rural area with history of trauma to the knee. There is a progressively enlarging ulcer which has not responded to your topical and systemic antibiotics. What we see is a case of tuberculous chancre. Now, this is because this occurs due to cutaneous inoculation. The child is uninfected. The age of the child itself indicates that this is the age group where tuberculous chancre is going to be seen. Nowadays, fortunately, because of the universal coverage of BCG vaccine, kind of presentation is rare, and maybe some rural areas, remote areas where the vaccine has not reached, and we might encounter patients from this side. These lesions might spontaneously regress with scarring and fistulae even without treatment, but that doesn't mean that we should not treat them, of course. The second case is going to be is an adolescent girl who comes to you with an asymptomatic lesion. This is a verrucous lesion, single non-tender lesion with a fissured surface with some amount of pus or keratinous discharge. Here, we would think of what? We would think of deep fungal infection like chromoblastomycosis, maybe an inflammatory dermatosis like, say, lichen simplex chronicus or hypertrophic lichen planus. And if the lesion is very chronic, we might even think of a malignancy in older patients. But in our setting, we have to keep tuberculosis verrucosa cutis very, very topmost in our list of differential diagnoses. Now, let's see what the two are. It's an exogenous inoculation. Is going to occur in a patient who has a good immunity because the patient is sensitized. No constitutional, don't think that just because a child does not have any fever, weight loss, etc., this is not going to be TB. No, lymphadenopathy may or may not occur. Usually the lower extremities are involved because they are more exposed to infected material. AFB are rare because this is a paucibacillary type of TB, and your tuberculin skin test is going to be positive. Now here we see two photographs. One is, there is on the hand forest, you have serpiginous annular associate morphology and above, or rather the verrucous lesion is usually Hello, am I audible?
Hello, yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I think disconnected.
No, your screen is not visible, ma'am.
Hello.
Hello.
I've shared my.
Now it's,
Yeah. Now
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
visible.
Visible.
I don't know why suddenly it disconnected.
No problem. It is visible now.
So these are the clinical clues to look for as against this, and of course you will have multiple lesions because of autoinoculation and pseudochimerization in a case of viral wart. Next, we have a patient. This is obviously an adult patient, but the reason why I'm showing you this is because unless and until we diagnose cutaneous tuberculosis of the TBC form very early, then the child might go on progressively to end up with this kind of a lesion, which is extremely grotesque and is going to cause a lot of scarring and even a high risk for malignant transformation. So this is the reason for early diagnosis, or rather try for early diagnosis. We have already seen the different clinical clues that we should look for. Now we move on to the third case. This is a young boy who comes with painful swellings in the neck, no constitutional symptoms. On examination, we find that there are multiple matted lymph nodes, which are, some of them are tender. There is an ulcer with a bluish margin. We have to look for the undermining of the edges. That means we'll be able to insert either a paper or a pin or something. The margins are, overhanging margins are cover the edge of the ulcer. That is what we mean by undermining. So this is very typical of tuberculous ulcers, be they chancre or ulceration of some other form of tuberculosis. So if we do not have a high index of suspicion, we would think of bacterial abscesses, something like botryomycosis, maybe an atypical mycobacterial infection. But this is a case of typical scrofuloderma, which is arising from the cervical lymph nodes. Now, if not diagnosed at this stage, some children might present to you with this kind of a picture, where there are intermittently discharging sinus tracts, which are healing with puckered scars. Here, we would keep a clinical differential of cervicofacial actinomycosis, nocardiosis, atypical mycobacterial infection. And if this occurs in the axilla of a post-pubertal child, then we would think of even hidradenitis suppurativa. So what is this scrofuloderma? It is the most common variant of TB tuberculosis that occurs in children. It would occur due to direct extension from the underlying focus. Commonest cause, as I've told you already, is lymph nodes, but internal sources are also known. And in children, you would have multifocal lesions. Now, next case is a child who comes to us with an annular erythematous infiltrated plaque, which has occurred in an old scar. So that is why we keep scar sarcoid as one of our differentials along with lupus vulgaris. Another child who comes with an extremely long-standing lesion, which has got an annular margin, scaling, a very raised keratotic margin. The clue here would be the central atrophy. So looking at the lesion, if we do not go for the history, we would think of annular sarcoid, annular psoriasis, even porokeratosis, because the margin is very raised. Some people might even treat this child as a tinea if they do not look into the history. So this is a patient of lupus vulgaris. There are different variants of lupus vulgaris, and we must keep this in mind when we are dealing with any kind of long-standing infiltrated lesion. So what is this lupus vulgaris? Lupus is derived from the word, it means the word wolf, because lupus is supposed to indicate something which is extremely mutilating or deforming. Nowadays, fortunately, we don't encounter such aggressive forms. It is a paucibacillary type of TB with moderate to good immunity. The host is previously immunized, and it presents typically as soft or reddish brown nodules or plaques, which usually occur over the lower half of the body. Now let's see a few of the different variants of lupus vulgaris. Diascopy is supposed to be historically the diagnostic investigation, wherein we will see yellowish brownish nodules when we press a glass slide over the surface. Now this is not very specific because we might see the similar picture in sarcoidosis as well. So what are the variants of lupus vulgaris? Now this is one variant where we would see a large lesion on the buttock. Probably this child is involved in maybe open defecation or something. That is why this lesion has occurred over here. There is an atrophy in the center and the margin, which is active, multifocal lesions, keratotic as well as ulcerative. Then we have lesions occurring over BCG sites like this child, or annular lesions around the site of BCG. A tumid type. Now this would be mistaken for something occurring due to a spectacle if the child is wearing spectacles, something like an acanthoma fissuratum. But this is nothing but tumid variant of lupus vulgaris. A TVC-like lesion. This atrophy is the giveaway because TVC would not have so much of atrophy. Another lesion which occurs on the dorsum of the hand. So now we come to the reason why lupus acquired its name lupus, the mutilating aggressive variant. It has got a large number of differentials, as I mentioned here. Anything which can cause destruction in the midfacial area would be a differential for this condition. Nowadays, fortunately, in developed countries, it's not seen, but in undeveloped countries, yes, we do come across this. Basically, this has to be diagnosed early because it is associated with immunodeficiency and severe malnutrition. Thalidomide is a drug of choice along with AKT in these patients to minimize the destruction. Now we come to some more unusual forms, the sporotrichoid variant, scrofuloderma as well as lupus vulgaris, both can come in a sporotype type, where linear lesions come along with cord-like or lymphatic thickening. Next is your inverse porotrichoid pattern, where the left spread from the involved inguinal lymph node. Usually this occurs in TB gamma or in a case of TBVC over the proximal lower extremities. Now, sometimes there is a lot of overlap between the clinical features of different subtypes of cutaneous tuberculosis, and then we are faced with a clinical conundrum as to whether this is TBVC or keratotic lupus vulgaris, because it could be either of the two. Investigations are supposed to come to our rescue in this case. Here, it could be scrofuloderma, which has now impinged upon the skin which is not having any underlying tuberculous structure, or it could be a lupus vulgaris which has occurred in the vicinity of your scrofuloderma. Now we come to our next case. This was a child who came to our OPD with multiple painful lesions. There were nodules, some of them looked like abscesses, some of them ulcerated. They were present over the sole of the foot, back. The clinical clues that we looked for here were the evening rise of temperature, weight loss, malnutrition. They were all present in this child. We also elicited history of tuberculosis in the sister of the child. This lesion was initially painless, and now because of secondary bacterial infection, it had become painful. So this is a case of tuberculous gamma, also known as metastatic abscess. It's an endogenous form of TB where there is hematogenous spread. We have to look for an underlying immunodeficiency and a focus of infection in these patients. They can present as multiple subcutaneous abscesses which would discharge or form sinuses. Now, I'd like to share some case reports which have been published in literature about certain unusual and interesting forms. There could be coexisting subtypes of cutaneous tuberculosis in the same patient, even if the child is immunocompetent. For example, this child had scrofuloderma associated with lupus vulgaris, and he also had tuberculosis verrucosa cutis in the same patient, coexisting at the same time. So this is extremely unusual, but it can occur. So please bear in mind. Now we move on to the next type, which is also an auto-inoculation type of TB. Females can have it in the perivalvular lesion or the perineal region. One would think of various STIs in adults, maybe a hepatic ulcer, but we have to keep in mind that this could be nothing but periorificial tuberculosis, non-healing perianal ulcer. Please keep TB in mind. Sometimes this can be misdiagnosed as Crohn's disease or an STI. So we have to look out for GI tuberculosis, genitourinary tuberculosis, and sometimes has occurred in this patient with a perianal ulcer. The patient did not have any abdominal source, but had got pulmonary TB. So these are all unusual forms, but they can be encountered in practice. So now we come to the worst form of cutaneous tuberculosis. The cutaneous form is not the thing to worry about, but it is a harbinger of extensive internal organ involvement like lungs and meninges. And there is hematogenous dissemination of Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So clinical presentation could be extremely non-specific with papules, pustules, vesicles, etc. So unless we have an extremely high index of suspicion and we find a focus for TB, we might miss this particular form of cutaneous tuberculosis. Now we move on to some other forms which are quite innocuous to look at. Grouped clustered asymptomatic follicular papules, which are better felt on palpation rather than on inspection. So we would keep a long list of differentials for this, something like keratosis pilaris, lichen nitidis, spinulosis, pityriasis rubra pilaris. But this is nothing other than lichen sclerozorum. We'll see a little later on why we diagnose this case as lichen sclerozorum. This can coexist with other subtypes of TB, or it could be not only Mycobacterium tuberculosis, but also with avian intracellular complex. Next type is a patient who comes with asymptomatic erythematous papules with necrotic center and adherent crusts, and they heal with varioliform scars. So obviously our differentials would be pleva, that is pityriasis lichenoides A varioliformis acuta, and maybe some form of id eruption if the scars have not yet formed. So what we would look for here in the histopathology is wedge-shaped necrosis, leukocytoclastic vasculitis, and typical tubercular granulomas. So sometimes you might find MTB also in the PCR. So this is none other than papillonecrotic tuberculin. Nowadays, there is a change in opinion. They feel that we should call it tuberculosis rather than tuberculin. And I'll tell you why in a while. The next type of tuberculate is one we are familiar with in adults. This is a rare cause of erythema nodosum. Another lesion which resembles erythema nodosum very, very clearly, but there is healing with atrophic scars and a greater tendency to ulcerate is nothing other than your erythema induratum or nodular vasculitis of Besant. This has been reported in a child, an infant. So you can see that this can occur at any age, absolutely. So age is no bar for this kind of a lesion. So now let's see what are these tuberculosis. So they are nothing but cutaneous immunological reactions to occult focus of tuberculosis in a child who has a good immunity. So you will not see this kind of a picture in children who are grossly malnourished or have immunodeficiency or immunocompromised. So there are some criteria for diagnosis of tuberculosis. You should have detect MTB in the stains and cultures, but you should be able to detect an intracutaneous TB first. There should be a positive skin test and IGRA, and the histopathology should be consistent with granulomatous tuberculosis inflammation. All response to AKT. So these are the criteria for diagnosis of tuberculosis. And nowadays, there are reports coming in that MTB has been found at the lesions of erythema induratum as well as papillonecrotic tuberculosis. So therefore, they are rechristening these forms as tuberculosis rather than tuberculosis. I'd like to share with you an interesting case that we encountered in our OPD. There was a young girl who came with a tender erythematous annular plaque with central crusting over the volar surface of the forearm. We found that she had two similar plaques along the left forearm in linear distribution. Now, what were the clinical clues that we found in this patient? We saw from history that she had developed these lesions 10 days after her tuberculin skin test. She had painless cervical lymph node swellings, which turned out to be of tuberculous etiology on histopathology. And on biopsy, the lesions had overlapping features of erythema nodosum as well as erythema multiforme. So she was diagnosed as a case of post-MAN2 test, query EN or query erythema multiforme. So such lesions can occur. So please go delve deep into the history to be able to diagnose these, because otherwise they could be quite baffling. So when should we think of cutaneous tuberculosis? Painless chronic abscesses, indolent ulcers, plaques and nodules that defy classification. Sometimes in children who are immunosuppressed or malnourished, we can have cellulitic-like lesions, or something like this child who comes with an ulcer, which is non-healing. So here, this child definitely deserves an evaluation for tuberculosis. So now we move on to diagnosis. Now diagnosis has two cornerstones: clinical features and laboratory tests. For the presumptive clinical diagnosis, I have also discharging sinuses over the sites where there could be underlying focus. Sometimes patient presents with asymptomatic raised reddish plaques or persistent warty lesions.
Hello.
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 राहुल काय झालंय?
I think मॅमचा आवाज येत नाहीये.
मॅम अनम्यूट मी केलंय.
Can you hear me now? Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello.
Hello. Yes, ma'am. We can hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know why it's disconnecting. My internet connection is good, but still there is some technical glitch.
2-3 स्लाइड मागे घे परत.
Can you hear me now?
Hello. Yes, ma'am.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Continue from this slide.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Yeah, okay. So the presumptive diagnosis of cutaneous tuberculosis, just a quick recap. Lymph nodes or some underlying focus. Then you can have long-standing plaques or verrucous lesions. These are your clinical clues to diagnosis of cutaneous TB. Now we move to investigations. So we have the hemogram, systemic inflammatory markers. In appropriate clinical settings, we have to do an ELISA for HIV and rule out other causes of immunodeficiency as well as immunosuppression. So this is a must. Now we move on to the specific investigations. A skin biopsy for us dermatologists is the gold standard for the diagnosis of TB. The specimen has to be taken from the proper place, from the margin. There is no point in taking the specimen from the atrophic or healed areas because it's not going to show you anything. So please take it from the correct part to be able to get a good yield. We have to send it for three things: the HPE, the culture, and the RT-PCR. Before that, we have to be on a head stain. However, because cutaneous TB is a paucibacillary type of tuberculosis, it has extremely low sensitivity. So we might not be able to get a good yield on AFB. So let's move on to culture. We'll just quickly rush through the tests. Culture is supposed to be gold standard generally, but again, because it is paucibacillary cutaneous tuberculosis, we might not get anything on a culture. So a negative culture does not rule out cutaneous tuberculosis. There are some rapid culture techniques which available might give you a better yield, and the advantage of a culture is a drug susceptibility that you can get. Next, we have your RT-PCR. Now, for paucibacillary type of TB, you have a better sensitivity, but the limitations are inability to detect the drug susceptibility. And again, in cutaneous TB, it is still not up to the mark. So to overcome all these limitations, this is one test which will help us do both detect the MTB as well as detect if there is any kind of resistance, particularly to rifampicin. And this is the currently recommended WHO guideline. This new test, that is the Ultra, Gene Expert Ultra, which has an extremely low limit of detection. That means even a few bacilli, if they are present, they will be detected. The unfortunate thing is that it cannot distinguish between live and dead bacilli, but then that's okay. We can go with that limitation. It is particularly useful in situations where there is gross difficulty in diagnosis, like children, extrapulmonary TB, and HIV. Now we come to the hot topic of discussion, that is the tuberculin skin test or a Mantoux test. It is a screening test. Please remember, it is not a test for diagnosis of tuberculosis. It does not allow you to diagnose, sort of distinguish between active infection versus latent infection, or rather active disease versus latent tubercular infection. So we should know two things. We should know the induration and we should know the risk of the host for development of active disease before we interpret this particular test. So based on these two factors, we have an induration of more than 10 mm, which is supposed to be suggesting infection. Except if the patient is HIV positive, then we can take 5 mm as the cutoff. But in normal situations for cutaneous TB, reports say that we should have more than 22 mm as our cutoff value. There are some types of TB where the test is going to be positive, that is lupus vulgaris, TBC, scrofulloderma, while the other three types of tuberculosis, you are going to get an absent or negative Mantoux reaction. So please bear that in mind. Now we come to histopathology. We can have your typical epidermal findings, but the main thing is that the dermis may or may not show you specific findings of tuberculosis. So it has to be taken with a pinch of salt, specifically in lesions like TBC. Lupus vulgaris can show you epithelioid granulomas and Langerhans giant cells as shown here. So the clues to pick out here is initially you get neutrophilic infiltrate, but later on the granulomas develop. If at all you have a chance of getting AFB, it is going to be on your initial stage and not when your granulomas are well developed. So that has to be remembered. So how to interpret the biopsy? Granulomas, if they are well formed without caseation, we think of lupus vulgaris and lichen sclerozorum. If your caseation is present, it could be either TBC, miliary TB, orificial tuberculosis, or papillonecrotic tuberculate. But if your granulomas are poorly formed but with intense necrosis, we have to think of scrofulloderma. So now this is an algorithm. Now this is a little complicated complicated. All I'll tell you here is that you have to perform biopsy, culture, and your Mantoux test. Look for granulomas, look for necrosis, do an X-ray test. If your culture is positive, obviously it is going to be nothing other than tuberculosis. If a culture is negative, but your PCR is positive, your TB is confirmed. If not, you have to look at other causes. If there is no granuloma, then of course, and your culture is negative, your PPD is negative, you have to assess for other causes. So this is the nutshell of this particular algorithm. We have to take all these three in conjunction. Systemic screening is completely recommended for all children who come with cutaneous tuberculosis. A complete screen of all the systems have to be done. When you start, either histology, your culture, microscopy.
Hello.
According to our extrapulmonary TB, we have the intensive phase where you give daily 4 drugs for 2 months, followed by a maintenance phase where we give 3 drugs for the next 4 months. MDR TB and XDR TB are quite unusual in cutaneous tuberculosis, but we have to keep it in mind if your patient is not responding within 5 weeks to your AKT. This is a list of your ATT drugs. I've given you a range of doses, but of course these drugs are not to be given singularly. We have to give them as this FDC, that is fixed dose combination pills, to improve compliance and to reduce the pill burden. So there are some weight categories. According to these weight categories, each tablet contains this composition HRZE, and according to the weight, you will either give 1 tablet, 2 tablets, 3 tablets, and so on and so forth, depending upon the weight of the child. So this improves the compliance. So as I mentioned earlier, there is something called as a retrospective diagnosis of tuberculosis based on your clinical suspicion. You start AKT, there is a response within 5 weeks, or at the end of intensive phase, you have a diagnosis. If not, then you have to think of MDR TB or reconsider tuberculosis as your diagnosis. So this slide is just there to tell you that there are patients who have had cutaneous tuberculosis for decades together. The lesion started in childhood at the age of 2 years, was diagnosed as hemangioma, and 42 years later, somebody thought of TB and diagnosed this case of lupus vulgaris. So I hope this doesn't happen with us. Moving on to BCG vaccination, there is uncertain efficacy against cutaneous TB, but as we saw earlier, there are lesions which can occur at the site of BCG, so that has to be kept in mind. Now, moving on to the smaller topic of atypical mycobacterial infections, there are 4 classes. We're not going to go into detail about the classification, but we must remember that the difference between MTB and non-tuberculous mycobacteria is that non-tuberculous mycobacteria are not contagious. That means a person who is infected with atypical mycobacteria does not infect anybody else. So that is very, very important to remember. They are found in habitat, that means in the environment, man-made as well as natural. This is one form of appearance which is seen in children who go swimming in pools which are not chlorinated properly. Then we have this which is a sporotrichia.
Hello. Hello. बहुतेक कनेक्शन लॉस झालं का माझा लॉस झालाय?
नाही नाही मॅडमचं लॉस झालं सर.
होय ना?
हो.
कॉल कर की एकदा.
हो.
So meanwhile, we can take a question. We can take question meanwhile.
हेलो हेलो हेलो
हाँ बोल स्वप्निल.
हाँ सर एक 2 मिनिटात जॉईन होतात मॅडम सर
हाँ
कम्प्युटर तो थोडा टेक्निकल प्रॉब्लेम आलाय 2 मिनिटात
नो
जॉईन
प्रॉब्लेम नो प्रॉब्लेम नो प्रॉब्लेम.
क्वेश्चन घ्या सर तोपर्यंत.
नाही मॅम हॅज टू
तीस-
आन्सर दॅट ना जस्ट
तीस-
वेट प्रशांत वेट
Okay, sir.
he
Okay,
will
sir.
join okay Ajay sir
Yes.
meanwhile you can talk about PDF sir
इनामदार सर म्हणणं बोलणार होते.
Inamdar sir hello
Okay. Sure.
yes sir you can talk about PDF sir
Yeah.
I request Dr. Inamdar sir to talk about PDF the forum till the time ma'am joins back.
Well, friends, this is just a forum which was formed with like-minded friends of us to disseminate and to share the knowledge about pediatric dermatology. We find that many times in many groups which we make, especially the WhatsApp groups for discussion, or sometimes we call our close colleagues to solve these problems and all, especially in diagnosing or even managing the availability of the drug or dosage schedule or how long, all those things we asked during these posts and all. We thought, okay, we should have a forum where regularly we conduct such clinical activities, especially the clinical clues and even laboratory clues, as Dr. Vasudha was showing the beautiful cases and how you can have a differential diagnosis. We thought with this we will be able to really have some dissemination of the knowledge and share our knowledge so that at the end the stakeholders, one is ourselves, to cater to the needs of our patients who are ultimate the stakeholders of our practice, our subject or our specialty. We thought this should be a forum. In fact, this is just a second step, I would believe. The first step was last month we did it. Regularly we'll be conducting such clinical activities. Maybe we are thinking in different angle later to have different aspects or sometime if time provides to have a detailed therapeutic approach to certain conditions which we feel often difficult or needs little more experience or expertise to deal with. We may also ask for your opinion at the end of each session to suggest some topics which you feel, and generally we can select later after going through the demand or what exactly all these people, our fellow colleagues wants to know more, so that such expert persons can be brought and discussed. And later we may have a small newsletter like thing, again to share the knowledge and not to show the knowledge. Sharing is the best way of learning. With these few ideas, we thought we should have something like a forum. Otherwise, we keep discussing every day some other thing over various WhatsApp group. This channelized in a formatted matter, in a manner, probably makes more sense, I believe. And probably we may think in posterity to have these talks archived to our website so that anybody can again view it. Of course, it will be for I won't say directly members who register for that, so that it should not be a public or open forum thing, simply because a lot of clinical pictures will also be there. So it cannot be more public. Probably for the benefit of our own professional colleagues, it's always welcome. The ideas are also welcome. It's nothing like it's the idea of X or idea of Y. It is a team work, and we thought together we work and learn and expect more number of people who can join this movement of making one subspecialty more interesting, because it forms a chunk of subspecialty. And also, of late, what I understood is the Indian Academy of Pediatrics or the pediatricians are also very much interested, and they started giving more respect for all of us, simply because, okay, it needs a specialized service. So that way your esteem of being a best in subject or in specialty or specialty also makes sense. And that is how the subject grows. Our esteem of being an active or a dynamic dermatologist also makes sense. And fortunately, for every disease, we have some or the other molecule being tried and easily available and immediately available as soon as things are available in the Western world also. So probably we'll have a session sometime later, or as and when necessary, how best we can use those newer molecules also. And repurposing of the older molecules also makes sense. Swapnil, I have time, or she has joined, or I can just Swapnil?
Yes, sir. You have time, sir. It will take another 2 minutes.
Okay, okay. Anyway,
And sir, hello. Just highlight about the membership and how to join the membership.
That Ajay will take.
Okay, okay, sir.
Dr. Ajay, can you just take it? This
Ajay,
is
sir.
the idea of an academic forum, that's all. It is apolitical, no hidden agendas here, and it's just sharing the knowledge, nothing else. But for that, we need a team. That team is there, that's all. Because otherwise, any team has to have a responsibility to deliver the goods. It cannot be just without any boundary also. Simply. Okay.
Ajay, sir, can you highlight about the memberships and the activities of PDF? Like,
Yes, yes. Thanks, Inamdar sir. Basically, Inamdar sir has already pointed out all the things about PDF. The forum shall have national as well as international experts who are specialized or have a special interest in pediatric dermatology, and discuss about the recent advances and discuss about recent treatment modalities as far as the pediatric skin diseases is concerned. Now, regarding the membership is concerned, we are formulating some protocols for that, and once the protocol is in or the this thing is finalized, we'll come back to you. But as sir has already said, there is no hidden agenda or any personal this thing as far as the PDF is concerned. Anybody can become a member, but let us wait for some time, as we are going to have the exact way to make a member of PDF. Thank you.
yeah, as I understand, there are a few the legal issues are pending with the society registration and everything. Once this is through, we can invite the memberships, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, sir.
Exactly.
Okay. I'll just check whether Vasudha joined back, or meanwhile, I don't think so. I'll call her, sir. Just a minute.
Otherwise, Dr. Chetan he can also answer the questions.
I request Dr. Chetan. Sir Chetan, sir. Hello.
Sir.
Dr. Chetan.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Meanwhile, you can talk. You can ask questions to Dr. Inamdar, sir, and he can.
There are already questions there.
Yeah, you can answer. You can interact with Inamdar, sir. Meanwhile, I'll check.
Yeah, there are a few questions already.
Sir, there is one question for you. How commonly we see the tuberculosis in children? and which tuberculate is commonly seen?
Yeah, very good question. In fact, in my own practice or whatever I have seen is lichen scrofulosaurum, yes, good number of cases of tuberculosis. Otherwise, the other mentioned things which are there in adults, the other tuberculosis I haven't seen, like papillonecrotic tuberculosis or something like that. Lichen scrofulosaurum is one common one.
Second
Yes,
one,
you also have an experience.
अरेंजच आहेत ते
Yes.
ऍक्च्युली मागच्या वेळी फार आम्ही हालचाल नाही केलेली तिथे पण ते म्हणाले होते की एक्झामच्या आधी मी
Hello?
सांगेल तेवढं ट्रे मध्ये
some voice
ठेवायचं
is coming.
म्हणून
Somebody's speaker is on. Hello. Sir, good afternoon, sir. Then the second question is what about the erythema nodosum in a child, and when to suspect that this is due to the secondary to tuberculosis? Then how to approach these cases, and what is the diagnostic test?
Well, we all know erythema nodosum is a very common presentation with underlying various causes. Even simple drug can also affect. What I do, even the streptococcal infection, just a big list is there. Let's not go into the list. How I approach is very important. Yes, I will do simple first, the ASLO titer, and then the ESR. ESR, if it is very high, of course, in triple number, 3 digits or above 80, and then I go even for any evidence of tuberculosis by doing a chest x-ray also. And with this, if there are any indications of it, then I think it is tuberculosis. Otherwise, invariably, hardly one or two I must have found out, invariably they will be due to some secondary infections actually. So they subside, and that's it. And if they recur, and then there has to be a focus, that has to be evaluated, things like that. That would be a better approach for erythema nodosum.
Sir, if there is a strong suspicious of
Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs would be enough to treat that. And a course of antibiotic usually we give as streptococcal infection is the most common one. Otherwise, there are specific like sarcoidosis or various other listed things, even mitral stenosis, all those things may not be much of value in our practice, I believe. But we have to go through it. Chetan, you can also tell if there are anything more.
So
There is nothing.
my question is that if there is a strong suspicion of a latent tuberculosis or tuberculosis in a case of erythema nodosum, then what is the definitive diagnosis? It is a culture, PCR, or only biopsy is sufficient, or it is a collaborative evidence of other investigations like raised DSR or X-ray chest showing some features of tuberculosis, or should we give a therapeutic trial of AKT in these cases?
There are two things. Histopathology is concerned, it has to be only it comes as a septal panicularity itself.
Yes.
I don't think you will get any evidence of tuberculosis there. It has to be corroborative evidence of the underlying systemic infection, blood investigations like even ESR. It's though non-specific, still holds good in our setup, I believe. And then, okay, if there are no obvious pulmonary manifestations or any other way of proving clinical evidence of tuberculosis, even a therapeutic challenge would also help. Of course, it has to be mentioned, written, everything, because of the legal issues of administering good amount of drug for quite a long period.
There is one more question from the audiences. Whether we see this MDR tuberculosis or XDR tuberculosis cutaneous cases, and if yes, then how should we manage the MDR tuberculosis, cutaneous MDR tuberculosis?
In fact, Dr. Vasudha was very categorical in showing the things. It is not that common, simply because most of them, what we see, the possibility, if you really classify them as possibility 1, I don't think that would be an issue. Otherwise, as rightly suggested, you have to have a second line of drugs. In case if you really can prove it, I don't think we'll end up in such a situation often.
Hello?
So shall I continue the questions?
No. Just a minute. Ma'am had joined back. So I think she will continue with the presentation.
Good.
Yeah, great.
Hello, can you see my screen?
Yes, Usra.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Make it slide view.
Yeah, I'm making it, sir. Yeah, once again, I apologize. I mean, I can't.
It's
whatever.
okay. We
Yeah.
have a session in between, like, don't worry. So we can.
Okay, so I don't remember where I was, but
You start, start with the, start with the diagnosis actually. Yeah, right. Maranum.
diagnosis.
No, the Maranum infection.
Yeah, this
This
is slide.
This is the slide.
Yes.
This one.
Atypical
Okay.
mycobacterial infections.
Okay, yeah. So then, based on the number of lesions that we can see in a particular patient, we have different drugs. Now, you can see here that rifampicin, ethambutol are common to TB as well as mycobacterial infection. But the problem is that these two drugs will cause only partial response because they are not to be used alone, or AKT will cause only partial response. So this is one way how you can differentiate between tuberculous and non-tuberculous mycobacteria. And the duration for treatment for non-tuberculous mycobacteria is very, very prolonged as compared to the MTB. So that is one difference that has to be kept in mind. Now, something which we are very familiar with, that is avium intracellular. This is avium and intracellular. There are two different organisms which usually cause infection as a complex, though we know it very well as something which is associated with a CD4 less than 50 or as a manifestation of immune reconstitution syndrome. But we can remember that it can be seen as easily in a child who comes to you without any immunodeficiency. A totally immunocompetent child can present with nodulo-ulcerative lesions, lupus vulgaris-like lesions, etc. This is a typical presentation of a patient who comes with adenitis, which is the commonest cause of childhood adenitis after tuberculosis. These lesions can rupture, can ulcerate, can form sinuses, very similar to tuberculosis. Now we come to rapid growers. Clinical settings in children would include malnutrition, immunosuppression, and post-surgical. Sometimes they can resemble nodular cystic acne in adolescents. So please remember that this is not acne, but it is a child who has come with a rapid growing mycobacterial infection of non-tuberculous type. This is an adult, but the same picture can be seen in a child as well, resembling trophiloderma, post-operative patient with abdominal surgery coming with non-tuberculous mycobacterial infection in the scars and IV catheter infection. So now when do we suspect rapid growing mycobacterial infections? More important is no response to short post-operative or AT. This was one child, this was an outbreak in fact of children who came with erythematous nodular lesions over the palms. We found, or rather the person who reported this found, that these children went to a swimming pool which was not chlorinated properly, and this was an outbreak of hand-foot disease caused by Mycobacterium abscessus infection. So how can we as healthcare providers come into and when don't let tap water in contact with catheters. Proper sterilization of all the surgical equipment using glutaraldehyde, and avoid benzalkonium chloride as an disinfectant. So these are the things you should look out for. Now we come to demonstration on non-tuberculous mycobacteria. They look pretty similar to tuberculous bacteria, except that they are longer and wider and have very specific biochemical properties which help the microbiologist. But we must remember to tell the microbiologist that we are suspecting non-tuberculous mycobacteria, because otherwise proper medium will not be used. Treatment, recommended drugs, list is mentioned here. The doses, of course, will be according to weight in children. The duration is much more than 6 months in many situations, though it's mentioned here as 4 to 6, but sometimes they do not respond to this particular this thing. Now we come to the final, before signing off, I'd like to shift back the focus on tuberculosis, because despite different pandemics might come and go, but tuberculosis seems to be here to stay. It is on the rampage and it is ravaging the country or the world. Every day there are more number of deaths due to tuberculosis, even more than probably COVID-19 in this current pandemic. So the WHO roadmap for childhood tuberculosis has 3 pillars. One is contact tracing, because I mentioned that household contacts are the closest things or the biggest risk factors for children developing TB in any form. Intensified case finding, and finally, the third and most important thing is preventive therapy. India's national guidelines mention that all childhood contacts of TB patients should be screened. Now, we did a study in our institute to see whether this guideline was being implemented or not, and we found, to our grim despair, that there was gross and suboptimal implementation and provision of IPT to these children. So I'd like to give you a sincere request from my side, a sincere appeal that please report all types of tuberculosis. Obviously, we'll deal with cutaneous tuberculosis to the proper agency. Either you can refer them to the institute, government institutes, or then you can report to the National INTC website. Thank you. Once again, I apologize for the technical glitches. Thank you so much.
Hello.
Hello?
I mean,
Yeah, hello.
the cases you shared are extraordinarily brilliant. I mean, it's like a master class on tuberculosis and atypical mycobacteria. Thank you so much, Vasudha. Now we'll ask the attendees to post some questions, and I'll hand it over to Dr. Chetan Rajput for Q&A session on tuberculosis and atypical mycobacteria. Dr. Rajput, please. I think Dr. Vasudha and Dr. Inamdar sir can join and answer together.
Mainly
Good
Vasudha.
afternoon.
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can add something, right?
Let them have that.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. Ma'am, a fantastic lecture and thorough coverage of all these typical and atypical mycobacterial infections. I have not seen such cases. Ma'am, we have a few queries.
Yeah.
What is the practical relevance of this classification? Does it make any difference in management of the tuberculosis?
Yeah, so practical importance is that the prognosis, because if we know that a particular infection is due to contiguous route, like for example scrophulodema, then we will look for lymph nodes. If it is there on the abdomen, we will look for ileocecal TB. If it is there on the scrotum, we'll look for testicular epididymitis due to tuberculous origin. So one is from the finding the source of the infection. So that is the most important reason why we need to know the classification. And second thing is the underlying pathology, like immunodeficiency, interpretation of the tests. As I said, unless we know the types which are paucibacillary and the types which are multibacillary, we will not know how to interpret a particular test. So that is why we need to know this classification. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, tell us something about the Montoux test. How to interpret, what are the significance, and how to proceed if the test is positive.
Yeah, so Mantoux test should actually, as I said earlier, should be called tuberculin skin test. First important thing to remember is that it is a screening test. It will not differentiate between active tuberculosis disease and your latent tuberculosis infection. So what we need to know is what is the clinical setting in which we are doing the test. If the child is immunosuppressed, not just child, but if any individual is immunocompromised, then the cutoff value is much lower. It would be 5 millimeters. But if there is no risk factor, then it would be 15 millimeters. If there is some risk factor, but not immunocompromised state, something like an IV drug abuser, then it would be 10 millimeter. So that is one thing that we have to remember about Mantoux test. It has to be taken in conjunction with the clinical scenario. That is about the Mantoux test. Yeah.
Nandar sir will guide something about this Montoux test interpretation.
No, I think what Madam has told is quite this thing. Probably we always get confused regarding the how much millimeter and all. That point has to be stressed, and I just want to know from Madam and Chetan or even Swapnil also. So, is there any difference between interpretation or the use of Montoux and IGRA test?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Mantoux test and IGRA test, both are tests for latent infection. Both of them do not tell you about clinical disease, but IGRA is important in that it is not affected by BCG vaccination, while Mantoux is affected by BCG vaccination. So a child who is vaccinated with BCG, depending upon what is the duration between the vaccination and the Mantoux test, will show a change in the value of Mantoux. But IGRA is not affected. So IGRA is more specific and also picks up, is more sensitive as well as specific as compared to Mantoux test. That is the major difference between the two.
Yes, sir. And what I understand is negative IGRA has a more predictive value. Like if the
Yes.
IGRA is negative, that means you are unlikely to have tuberculosis.
It has a negative predictive value.
Right.
It has a negative predictive value rather than a more than a positive predictive
Yes.
value.
Yes.
It is
So
the
a patient who has a
inflammatory-
negative IGRA will not have latent tuberculosis, will not have active disease.
Exactly.
Chetan.
Ma'am, one thing, this IGRA is an inflammatory mediator which is released by the bacilli. Huh?
Yes.
So latent cases, it could be positive, or in clinical cases it is positive. So what about treated cases? What happens to IGRA if the case is treated?
If
The-
the
does
case
the-
is treated,
Does
No,
the
as I said-
dead bacilli initiates the inflammatory response and release that mediator?
no, dead bacilli cannot, it cannot do that. But the thing is that the bacilli are actually incubated along with PPD. How this IGRA is done is that the patient's blood is taken and the lymphocytes, the lymphocytes have already released bacilli. Okay,
Yes.
they've released the reactant. So they are incubated along with the PPD overnight. So that is why a patient who is treated will not have a negative IGRA, but obviously the level, the titer of the IGRA is important. The titer will fall because
I
it
have-
yeah,
I
there
have
will
one
be a
question.
fall. Pardon?
Finish about the IGRA.
No,
I
sir,
have
I'm
one
done.
question. Although some Western literature mentions like for very minimal lupus vulgaris lesion or a child, just give only single drug INH. Is it advisable, or in Indian scenario it's not advisable?
No, sir. In no scenario it is advisable because there would be resistance. The problem is with resistance because a single drug is not the reason why multi-drug therapy came about, is because we do not test each and every patient for resistance. So we don't know if you give a single drug, then there are more chances of developing resistance to that particular drug. So and these different drugs have different mechanisms of action. So that is why that is the rationale of multi-drug therapy in an organism which is slow growing like M. tuberculosis. So it is not, INH can be, nowadays in fact, INH is not advocated as a single drug for prophylaxis also. There are some reports which say that you should use 2 drugs even for prophylaxis rather than a single drug.
Ma'am, as you mentioned in your presentation, like in even in papillonecrotic tuberculosis or lupus vulgaris, we have there is a chance of tuberculous bacilli present in the lesion, right?
Yes, yes.
So can we do an IHC, because they are doing it for like cervical tuberculosis or endometrial tuberculosis, the immunohistochemistry with tubercular antigen, and they found that which is very high sensitivity and specificity. So do you have any experience about IHCs being done in biopsies?
No, we do not have any experience as such, but yes, IHC is coming up for diagnosis of tuberculosis also, like some other infections.
Yeah, because
So I
they are
have no
doing it for
experience.
endometrial and genitourinary tuberculosis very routinely, I mean.
It is used for extrapulmonary TB. No reports so far about cutaneous TB as
I
such.
think we should
But
do it
it could be a
actually.
potential, yes. It could be a potential investigation.
Ma'am, what should be the method of choice for culture, whether it is a conventional LJ medium or the advanced one, BACTEC?
BACTEC is definitely better. Radiometric media are preferred. Why? Because they give faster results. The problem with LJ medium is that it takes more than 4 to 6 weeks for the growth. So BACTEC gives faster results, greater yield. So the sensitivity is much more for BACTEC.
Any difference in about the positivity? That means the conventional media has a low positivity or BACTEC has a high
Yes,
positivity.
it does.
It is.
BACTEC can pick up fewer bacilli. That is why for cutaneous TB or extrapulmonary TB, where the number of bacilli is expected to be less as compared to pulmonary TB, there you would prefer radiometric media like BACTEC rather than the conventional LJ medium.
Ma'am, tell us something about the LMDF, or what we called its figure, whether it is a misnomer or it is a part of tuberculosis.
It is actually, it was now, tuberculosis were originally classified as true tuberculosis, facultative tuberculosis, and non-tuberculosis. Okay, so true tuberculosis used to be your lichen sclerophotozorum and papillonecrotic, which out of which papillonecrotic is now considered as probably tuberculosis. Your facultative were erythema nodosum and induratum, and LMDF was supposed to be thought to occur with TB, but now it is no longer considered as a tuberculate. It could be either rosacea, it could be sarcoid, or it could be part of non-specific facial granulomas.
How to differentiate the cases of typical cutaneous tuberculosis from atypical mycobacterial infections?
Clinical grounds, it is extremely difficult to differentiate, but on histopathology, you will not see the typical tuberculous granuloma that you would see. I mean, there are differences in the quantity rather than the quality on histopath. Second thing is, of course, the biochemical tests. There are some very specific, like para-nitrobenzene test or the nitrate test. So there are some tests which are done on the culture, which help you differentiate between the tuberculous and the non-tuberculous mycobacteria. PCR and IGRA, that is also one test which will help you differentiate. But MANTU will not help you because there is a lot of cross-reactivity between the two.
One article mentions about that in typical cutaneous tuberculosis cases, the lymphadenopathy is mostly posterior cervical or axillary or inguinal. While in atypical mycobacterial cases,
that is clinically,
clinically.
No, you can that you can do for adenitis, because adenitis is unilateral in case of non-tuberculous, while it can be bilateral more commonly in case of tuberculous mycobacteria.
Yeah,
but yes, that is there for adenitis.
Adenitis or the ulcers which are forming over underlying lymphadenopathy, they are more common in submandibular lesions in atypical mycobacterial cases.
Yeah.
Ma'am, how to differentiate the single plaque of this TT Hansen's or BT Hansen's from lupus vulgaris?
Most and foremost thing is, of course, you have to look at sensations, you have to look at the surface, because in lupus vulgaris, pardon?
Child is there.
Yeah, it's a child. That's what. So you can do a hot and cold test also, which is a very early sign of anesthesia, which even the child would be able to make out whether it is hot or cold. It is not possible to make this out, or rather pinprick, it is very difficult for a child to tell. Nerve to patch may be there. Usually single lesions of TT or BT Hansen's can have nerve to patch, which is not there. Satellite lesions, breaking of margin, all this is there in case of your BT Hansen's. Pseudopods and satellite lesions, and scarring is not a case or not a feature of Hansen's, which is present in case of lupus vulgaris. Scarring at one end and your spread in the other direction.
Inamdar sir wants to say something.
Diascopy, does diascopy help?
Yes, so diascopy can help, but diascopy is actually a very subjective thing, and it is not very easy to pick up this color in our skin type. It is easy to pick this up in whiter, fairer skin types, but in darker skin types, it is extremely difficult to see these apple jelly nodules. That is the problem.
If Dr. Ankad is there on the
dermoscopy is one way you can probably make it.
That may show some light. And also, it's just an observation. Always they look more juicy granuloma. I mean, picture
Succulent.
also.
Succulent.
The dry nature of the tuberculite, unless it is in reaction and all. Of course,
Yes.
it's a subjective observational thing which makes you.
Yeah,
to do
that's what I
that.
said. So the surface would be dry. In case of a Hansen's lesion, the surface is expected to be very dry with some scaling and all, which is more succulent in case of lupus vulgaris.
Dr. Chetan, there is one question from Akhil Shah. Just see it.
Yeah, I just saw it, sir. That I will cover in another. I will compile with another question, sir.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Ma'am, already sir has elaborated about erythema nodosum. Can you tell something about when to suspect that erythema nodosum is secondary to tuberculosis? Or when to suspect that it is due to tuberculosis? Huh?
Acute erythema nodosum is rarely due to tuberculosis. It's usually in children due to streptococcal cause. So when a child gets repeated attacks, chronic, which are not responding to your anti-streptococcal medicine, you definitely need to think of tuberculosis as the cause. Otherwise, clinically, there is no difference. A chronic course, a recurrent course, and of course, you have to evaluate the child for TB.
There is one question, ma'am. If there is a strong suspicion of cutaneous tuberculosis and parents are not willing or affording for biopsy or test, can we go ahead with the Montague's test results, and is it a sufficient indicator to start AKT or to give a therapeutic trial?
Yes, medico-legally, I do not know. Of course, it depends on how well you have counseled the parents about that. If they are not willing, then you have to definitely counsel them and tell them that we have to treat on clinical grounds. But Mantoux test, as I said, in children has to be used with a pinch of salt because they are recently vaccinated. So that is why it is, IGRA would be better. In a child who has been recently vaccinated with BCG, few years ago, of course, IGRA would give you a better idea rather than a Mantoux test. Because Mantoux test will only indicate that the child has been infected. It will not tell you that that particular lesion is TB. You have to go with clinical acumen and IGRA.
Or we can give a therapeutic trial of AKT.
Yes, therapeutic, that's what I said. Then you have to counsel the patient, parents. But if you want sufficient evidence, then you can do an IGRA, which is non-invasive, and along with clinical thing, you can go in with a therapeutic trial.
What should be the duration of therapeutic trial? That when should we consider
5
that?
weeks.
5 weeks.
Minimum of 5 weeks, except for a tuberculate, because tuberculates take much longer. But if it is cutaneous tuberculosis, then 5 weeks the response should start. If there is no improvement at all clinically by 5 weeks, then either it is drug resistant TB or then you have to reconsider your diagnosis. But you have to complete the intensive phase. 5 weeks is that way too short to interrupt the treatment. Complete your 2 months, 8 weeks, and then you can take a call.
Ma'am, does this BCG vaccine protects from cutaneous tuberculosis too? As sometimes we see the lupus vulgaris or scrofuloderma at the site of scar. So this is protective for pulmonary tuberculosis. Does it protect to cutaneous tuberculosis also?
Actually, there is not enough data regarding BCG protection against cutaneous tuberculosis. But what we do know is that the interval between the vaccination is what is the most important factor. The longer the duration between vaccination, the less the protection declines with the increasing interval, and it does not have sufficient efficacy against cutaneous as compared to the systemic tuberculosis. We do not have enough data yet for that.
And how long does this immunity last? Means how many years this immunity lasts into cases of tuberculosis? BCG
if
vaccine.
it is systemic, 10 years, they say, 10 years, we do not have, sometimes booster doses have to be given after 10 years. So that is why in high risk populations, booster doses are given. Healthcare providers or underdeveloped or malnourished children, you can give booster doses of BCG in these patients.
Does it protect from atypical mycobacterial infections?
Atypical mycobacteria, again, there aren't enough data because patients with BCG vaccination have got the typical mycobacterial infection.
As we do the Montague's test with the purified protein derivative of Mycobacterium tuberculosis in cases where there is a typical cases, but what should be used in atypical mycobacterial infections?
See, according to guidelines, 2 TU, that means 2 tuberculin units should be used of PPD for doing a Mantoux test. But since 2 is not available, we use 5. Okay, 5 is what is used. If it is an HIV positive patient and all, guidelines are not there for it. For atypical also, there are no different guidelines. But there is a lot of cross sensitivity between M. tuberculosis and atypical mycobacteria. So you might get with 5 also. So there is nothing like you have a different, strength of PPD that is used for atypical mycobacteria. That is not so. You can do it with the same one.
Or a PPD of other organisms like Marinum, Scrophulaceum are available there, or should test for that?
No. You mean the antigen? Okay,
Yes,
I thought you meant the amount, the quantity.
Yes.
No, the antigen, because atypical mycobacteria are not so common. So you do not have commercially available preparations of the antigen for doing a PPD with it. So that is the reason why its ability to cross react with M. tuberculosis is the factor used for doing the Mantoux test.
Ma'am, do you suppose if the culture is negative, PCR is positive, but it is not differentiating between live and dead bacilli, then still you consider for a therapeutic trial in atypical cases, atypical mycobacterial cases, not the typical one? Do you consider
atypical mycobacterial? Yes. Atypical, you can go ahead with a therapeutic trial because but then the problem here is that unlike TB, which should show response between 5 weeks to 8 weeks, Atypical mycobacteria can take anything up to 6 months to show a response, and you should continue your treatment for 2 months beyond this clinical response. So you are justified based on clinical suspicion to go ahead with your treatment.
And how to treat these atypical mycobacterial infections, and what should be the duration of the treatment, and whether AKT should be added to that regimen or it should not be added?
AKT need not be added. If you are very sure that it is not tuberculosis, based on the growth characteristics, IGRA, PCR, you need not give AKT. You can directly go ahead with your atypical mycobacterial infection. That, as I mentioned, the list of drugs, there are multiple drugs which can be used, which itself shows that no single drug is shown to have very good efficacy. That is the problem. Though tuberculosis causes more morbidity and mortality, it shows a better response to drugs as compared to your atypical mycobacteria, which are more difficult to treat.
What is the difference between miliary tuberculosis and TB gamma?
Okay, so miliary tuberculosis is dissemination of M tuberculosis from an internal focus, and the patient has a very, very poor immunity. Okay, the patient is usually bedridden, malnourished, maybe having TB meningitis, etc., and presents clinically with a non-specific rash, like any other miliary rash. Could be papulovascular, it could be pustular. Okay, so you would not even think of TB. That kind of a rash you would get in a patient. You would have to know that the patient has got internal TB. But tuberculous gamma usually presents with subcutaneous nodules and abscesses. You will not get non-specific rash. You will get proper abscesses, which are subcutaneous and painless. That is the difference. And the treatment, of course, the immunity is better in gamma as compared to your miliary TB.
Tuberculosis. And how to monitor the adverse reactions to AKT drugs, and what are the common adverse reactions you see?
Okay, so in children, the tolerance is much better. Paradoxically, children are supposed to tolerate AKT much better than adults. But hepatotoxicity is an issue which crops up in children also. The commonest issue is hepatotoxicity because your INH, your rifampicin, pyrazinamide, okay, these are all drugs which can cause hepatotoxicity. So you have to monitor hemogram, you have to monitor your LFTs. And the vision, you have to monitor the vision also in children who are on AKT. Give pyridoxine along with your AKT in the child to minimize the side effects. So this is the monitoring.
One question is there from Madam Dr. Vinay Kulkarni sir, is saying that the approximately 40% of the people have a latent tuberculosis. So how
Yes.
to interpret the IGRA, especially in older children? So,
sir, with IGRA, because it is latent tuberculosis, we cannot take it as a standalone test. We have to use it along with your appropriate clinical setting. So an IGRA may be positive, but unless and until that particular lesion or that particular internal involvement is very, very suspicious of TB, we cannot just go by a positive IGRA, because as you correctly said, it might just show you that it is a latent infection. So this is the fallacy about using IGRA as well as your MANTU test in our thing. High chance of latent tuberculosis infection. That is it.
ma'am, thank you. Thank you.
So you have to correlate it clinically. You have to correlate it with your microbiological tests, with maybe your biopsy. You cannot take it only as a standalone investigation in our setup.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Swapnil sir, do you have any questions? And Inamdar sir is there?
There is one question
There
from
is one
Tolat
question.
sir
Yeah. There is one
regarding
question.
role of FNAC.
Yes.
Yes, sir. FNAC can be done initially, though of course it is not very, very pathognomonic. But FNAC for children or for lymph nodes, rather than skin lesion, adenitis, FNAC will show you a tuberculous inflammation. Though on skin, it will not show you a very specific feature of tuberculosis. You have to do a biopsy for that. FNAC is not very specific. You will not get the caseous necrosis, you will not get the well-formed granulomas. In early lesions, you will get probably the suppurative inflammation that will be seen. You can do an FNAC, you can do an AFB stain on the FNAC specimen. That is one thing that FNAC will help you with, particularly if biopsy is not possible or the child is not allowing, then yes. But it is not a substitute for your histopathological examination.
One question is there, ma'am. Does therapeutic trial with ATT is allowed? I think it is mentioned there.
Yeah, so it is allowed, as in, as I said, medico-legally, you are not wrong because you have done all the investigations and your investigations have not given you enough supportive evidence. But clinically, you can have a presumptive diagnosis of tuberculosis, and then you are very much justified in giving a therapeutic trial because it is mentioned in the book, it is mentioned in literature as one of the diagnostic criteria, a retrospective diagnostic criteria for diagnosis of cutaneous tuberculosis or any type of TB for that matter, not just diagnosis for cutaneous TB. You are definitely justified, medico-legally also.
Yeah, if the investigations are not supporting the diagnosis and there is a strong clinical suspicious of tuberculosis, then therapeutic trial should be given.
Right.
Yes. Swapnil sir, any questions? Inamdar sir, do you have?
I think, I mean, she's covered it inside out. Like there's
Yes,
nothing
yes,
left to
exactly.
discuss now. If there are no questions, I'll request Dr. Mutalik sir to share his words of wisdom, and then we can conclude. Mutalik sir.
Yes. Just let me share my screen. Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Most difficult job for me. Words of wisdom. Wisdom not in the words. Wisdom is meaning within the words. This was by Khalil Gibran. You have seen all the colors of tuberculosis today.
Violence or death?
Nothing remains to be talked about wisdom. Actually, humiliation to Vasudha. Today's words of Vasudam. What she, to summarize, commonest in childhood is Crofilorama followed by LV, TVC and TB Shankar. Gamma and Milliamberry forms seen rarely as with severe malnutrition and immunosuppression. Tuberculosis in children, lichens, Clophosphorum, commonest followed by papillonecrotic tuberculosis. Erythema nodosum and induratum rare as compared to that in adults, but it is also seen, so we should not miss it. So when to suspect cutaneous tuberculosis? This is Inamdar sir's favorite Sherlock Holmes as a child. Chronic non-healing ulcers, sinuses healing with occurred scars, chronic asymptomatic plaques or varicose lesions with atrophy at margins, suppurative lesions with lack of response to antibiotics. What are the diagnosis tests? We have elaborate discussion on Montauk's tuber, then IGRA. But most important is demonstration of AB on smear or biopsy. Somebody raised a question about the cost of biopsy and other things. Actually, to diagnose even our dermatopathologist friends waive off the charges. We, especially even in poor patients, we don't take any charges. But for the betterment of the child or the patient, we should go ahead with these tests. These are preliminary tests. We should not avoid and just do a tuberculin test. Histopathology features of epithelial granulomas with or without caseation. Then comes culture, RT-PCR and Mantoux test, and then complete systemic screening as already mentioned. So this is a very good saying that I never lose. I either win or learn. This was by Nelson Mandela. So we had another super king in today's webinar, and we'll keep on inviting this for the ideal, that is Indian Dermatology League. The super king will always enlighten us with his sixers. So I will observe just like the kid of a Charlie Chaplin. Thank you very much.
Okay, with this words of super wisdom, I think we will like to conclude the session. But before that, I would like to thank the PDF and Jain Pharma and JP Aesthetics, which are our sponsors for this webinar. and they have taken all the efforts for this PDF and this webinar. So thank you very much, and we will meet soon. The timings will be, the date and time will be conveyed to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Vasudha. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vasudha.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you all.